Alrighty, how's it going? Jonathan here with Boston Collectors. It's been a little over 3 months since our last review, and I wanted to jump back into it with Reva, as seen in the Kenobi series. I personally enjoyed Moses Ingram's portrayal of Reva, and I believe the majority of what was written for her in this series. At this point, I'd like more information on her character and what her journey is going forward. Well, that, and I'd still like the second sister at some point. Getting back on topic, this was one of my most anticipated figures alongside Wrecker from the Bad Batch last year. I'm a fan of the character and costume design, so I have high hopes going in. While we're at it, consider liking this video and subscribing for future content. It's the best way to help support our growth. Out of the box, Reva's equipped with a pair of relaxed hands utilizing molds we haven't seen before. Hot Toys is known to reuse molds often, but I'm glad to see they went the extra mile. These are gestures I'd rather use for the included holo projector, but more on this later. For now, it does a great job for neutral and stoic poses. And it'll have to do for comlink poses too. And I say that because Hot Toys included one right fist for her release. And like the single fist, we also have one single force gesture for the left hand. I feel as though I'm beating a dead horse here because I never see complaints around the way hands are chosen. Hot Toys can certainly make them, but for whatever reason, they choose not to. This is multi-use in a way, since it's a wider gesture capable of holding the holo projector mentioned previously. There are 2 holograms included, beginning with Obi-Wan Kenobi as seen on Jabim. And lastly, we have the 5th brother, whose figure was teased back in 2022. Other holograms from previous releases can be used here, such as Darth Vader from the Grand Inquisitor, as well as the Imperial Light Cruiser from Luke Skywalker. Next up, we have Reva's main hilt design. Out of the box, it's pre-equipped with the smaller attachment, which is kind of funky to apply to the CoverTech clip. It is possible to rig it using her arm, but if you'd rather have an easier time playing with it on her hip, you can replace this piece with the longer version and bypass the extra step. As for the circular form, it's a gorgeous sleek design with a satisfying blend between black and grays. She didn't use this form often, but we'll touch more on this in a bit. Since she's using a double-sided hilt, she comes with 2 static lightsaber effects and 2 dynamic effects we'll showcase later. In the meantime, we also have Reva's half-hilt Vader disconnected before their fight. Since she never technically held both, I get why one was included, and I appreciate the extra hilt design. Similar to Darth Maul's split saber from the Phantom Menace release, there's a subtle design at the halfway point. I doubt I'll ever use it, but it is cool to have. Before diving into the LED lightsaber, let's go ahead and cover the included electronic components. We have 3 different pieces in total: the USB lightsaber box, the display stand clip, and lastly, the belt clip. The USB box is straightforward with an on and off switch off to the side. On top, Hot Toys reused the same box which was given to the Grand Inquisitor for his release. He needed 2 ports, but Reva doesn't. As for connecting the clips, it's a simple insert and slide mechanic to lock it into place. I'd advise against using the belt clip for Reva unless you can find another way to make this work without the display stand. I'm not really a fan of digging the clip into the figure and possibly harming the fabric. It also tends to ride up slowly over time, and I'd rather just skip the stress of it. When it comes to prepping the figure for the USB saber, you'll need to remove the hand and gauntlet to install it properly. But let's cover the base first. It's reminiscent of Moff Gideon's display base, but this one's a bit cooler in terms of the gunmetal coloring. It features metallic dry brushing along the grooves and the standard tinfoil sticker nameplate for the 3rd sister. For her release, she was provided a waist clamp, but we will need the back of it to support the connector clip. And now that we're all set, we can add Reva to the stand. I'd recommend pre-equipping either the left or right hand on any saber hilt you choose to pose her with. The hands are incredibly difficult to open up, so it'll require a bit of patience. As for the installation, you'll want to feed the cord through the gauntlet and leave just enough so there isn't a strain in the connection. At this point, all we need to do is adjust our pose and we're almost set. I say almost because you'll need to supply the USB-C cord as well as the 5-volt charging block. And now that we're all set, we can go ahead and turn on the saber. The effect isn't any different from the light-up arms, but it's a step in the right direction for brighter sabers later on. I'm surprised to see Hot Toys made her circular hilt the LED light-up version versus the half design we see her utilize more often. As I mentioned earlier, she didn't use it that much. For what it's worth, this is a much better workaround than uninstalling an arm and reinstalling another. I'm not really disappointed with the lightsaber brightness, only because Hot Toys never mentioned making the effect brighter. This was a workaround due to the button cell battery issues with Australia. But like I said, this is a great starting point and hopefully they work on making it brighter later on. I also hope they consider providing hilt caps as seen with the Mandalorian Ahsoka. If you're aiming for a single ignited look, the other side of the hilt will end up shining through. As for the dynamic effects, the base of the effects and the outer blades are the only lit portions here. It is kind of a bummer, but I didn't really expect much. For me, she'll be using the hilt as seen here. There are a few more accessories here that won't ever see the light of day. Here we have the bandage, which can be wrapped and velcroed around her midsection. As for the cloak, it made her portrait spring up off of the neck, which made it more problematic than anything. It's a great looking cloak, but too much of a hassle to use for me. And with the accessories out of the way, we can go ahead and discuss the portrait. Reva's portrait design is beautiful, but it isn't without its flaws. Under low lighting conditions, it looks like a real person. Under brighter light, it isn't bad, but I question if it's Moses Ingram's likeness or a mix. There are some features they practically nailed. The shape of her ears, mouth, and nose, to name a few. The likeness, however, suffers from the angle it's posed in. As you can see here, the portrait work is good, but I don't see Moses Ingram. Her hair is an entirely different story, though, and it genuinely appears if it's her hair braided to her scalp. The tension and wisps of hair around her edges are absolutely flawless. The overlapping braids add a sense of depth that we haven't seen before on this scale. Her hair is then twisted together and fall past her shoulders as seen in the series. Not to mention, they finally pulled off the fade on the lower part of her neck, which tie in the rest of her hairstyle. While I give the hair design a flawless 10 out of 10, it doesn't quite save the portrait, and here's why. Her eyes are supposed to be closer together, whereas here they're slightly further apart. I also find there's more of a chubby nature to her face versus the leaner appearance we have here in front of us. Reva's character was determined, and while I feel there's a mild form of it in the furrowed brow, I don't feel that determination in her eyes. The best way I could see it being done is by lowering her eyelids slightly and adding a subtle squint beneath her eyes. However, some of these changes might be at the request of Moses versus blaming Hot Toys. We'll never really know. We know who this is supposed to be, and they did a decent job, but I feel as though there's room for improvement. I'm giving her portrait a 7 out of 10. Let me know what you all think about the likeness and if you feel it's true to the actor or could be improved on. While the portrait left a little bit more to be desired, the overall design of the outfit is exceptional. Out of the box, she's a bit shorter than you'd expect, but we'll showcase that in a bit. Beginning with the boots, these are molded in plastic and have a split cut design allowing for a wider range of articulation. For these to be plastic, they do a great job mimicking a leather-like texture. Hot Toys didn't want a basic figure body for Reva's likeness. To really embody Moses' figure, they added padding along the outer portion of her thighs, which gives it a more realistic look. Not only that, the design in the middle of the pants can be seen on both the front and back of the figure, adding visual interest to the textures throughout her suit. Speaking of visual interest, there are tiny imperial cogs lining the entire inside of her cape as well. As for the gauntlet armor, that too is molded in plastic and flows really nicely with the gloves as seen here. On the opposing gauntlet, you can find the comm link coordinating with the contrasting colors as seen on her belt. That too is molded in plastic. I'm not entirely sure of the process it took to get our figure together, but I feel as though they took their time with this one. Her shoulder armor and chest armor is, you guessed it, molded in plastic. I don't have any complaints here because the molds are sleek and offer the same look to what we see in the series. When it comes to the midsection of the figure, it feels more like a Spider-Man suit material. I can honestly say I don't think pleather exists here at all. The tailoring to her suit is clean, and I couldn't nitpick this if I tried. There's also a decent amount of articulation in the waist if that matters for you posers. I don't really see myself posing her dynamically, but for what it's worth, you can get some great poses out of her. For me, she'll be in more of a stoic character pose. Reva's kind of on the short side, as you can see here with the Grand Inquisitor. Next up, we have the Empire Strikes Back Darth Vader. We also have Moff Gideon just edging her in height. Then there's Grand Moff Tarkin with a noticeable difference. Next, we have the Death Trooper. And we also have the Purge Trooper. Then there's the shortest Star Wars figure in my collection, being Jyn Erso. Since we're having fun, I went ahead and grabbed Director Krennic. And lastly, the Shadow, otherwise known as Maul, although I'm unsure if she aided in hunting him down. The entire design of the Third Sister is a beautiful flow of monochromatic colors, textures, and artistry wrapped in one. She offers a unique style to the collection alongside characters like Vader and Grand Inquisitor without losing her own identity. There are some questionable decisions with her release though, whereas the others are always referencing the hand selection. I would have been okay with substituting the cloak and bandage for a better selection of hands and a magnetic Grand Inquisitor badge for her vest. Even though it was short-lived, she was the Grand Inquisitor at one point, and it would have made sense. With that said, I'm giving the overall release a firm 7.5 out of 10. Even with my gripes, Hot Toys genuinely captured Reva's suit design and scaled it down to a 6-scale figure flawlessly. I'm happy to have her in the collection, and I look forward to all of the other Inquisitors at some point. And with that, I'm Jonathan with Boston Collectors, and it doesn't matter what we rate the figure. If you like it, we love it. Catch you next time.